"This place is wrong," was the first words out of Revan's mouth once the team exited the Normandy. This was different from the Reaper Corps, though there was a similar feeling coming from somewhere nearby. This base didn't feel like a Force user like the ancient ship did, it felt like a nexus. A dark nexus unlike any she had felt before. "How?" Commander Shepard demanded, concern coloring her emotions. "There's been uncountable amounts of death and suffering here," Revan replied. "But it's strange, like an echo of an echo. As if the same people suffered and died here over and over for millennia. Apologies, it's hard to describe." "I don't know if I want to know," Shepard muttered. "Good thing we're here to trash the place instead." Revan nodded at that and moved to join her team. It had been a struggle to choose how to split the team since while that plan was to move along two paths and rejoin once they were in the main chamber, there was the chance that either team could get stuck and would have to maneuver on their own. That meant making both teams as balanced as possible. Definitely a struggle considering how unique the members of their group were. In the end, Revan decided to take Jacob, Miranda, Mordin, Jack, and Kasumi with her while Shepard took the others and Legion prepared to infiltrate the ventilation shaft. "So, ready to squash a bunch of bugs?" Jack asked, cracking her knuckles and rolling her neck. "I can't wait to cut loose." "This isn't a game, Jack," Miranda scolded. "Pay attention to the surroundings." "Relax, cheerleader, you don't see Ice Queen freaking out about it, do you?" "Should still pay attention," Mordin added. "Good habit when working in the field." "Didn't realize Jacob shared that stick up his ass." "Enough," Revan sighed before things could get out of hand, even as Kasumi snickered off to the side. "Legion is almost in position. Be ready to move once he gives the signal." Yeah. None of you better get in the way of my fun," Jack muttered, but Revan was pleased to see her follow the order. "We are probably going to be facing heavy resistance the moment the collectors are able to detect us," Revan continued. "As usual, I will mostly move independently while you support me from behind. Miranda, you're going to be my sub-commander." "Aye, Revan. Keep in mind, this is going to be a long fight. Pace yourselves, watch each other's backs, and may the Force be with us." "Amen," Kasumi joked. Revan decided not to reply to the thief. She was well aware it was a coping mechanism for her nervousness. Smaller conversations broke out among the team as they waited. Little things like Miranda commenting on Jack's decision to wear a full shirt on a mission for once, Mordin wondering about some scientific aspect of their surroundings, or Jacob remarking on the blaster weapons Revan had provided once again. But despite their efforts, the tension was still building as they waited for the beginning of their mission. Revan supposed it was one thing to embark on a potential suicide mission, where they expected to leverage all their skills and abilities against their foes, and another entirely to sit around in the enemy's main base doing nothing. Thankfully Legion contacted them not long later. "We are in position," the Geth reported. "External temperature slightly elevated but within operational tolerances. No obstructions detected. Ready to begin, Shepard Commander." "Great. Second squad, you in position?" Shepard responded. Revan clicked on her vocalizer. "Ready on your signal, Commander." "Right, then let's get this party started. I'll see all of you on the other side." The line closed. "Yes, let's begin." Fucking finally. Oh. Just because the Normandy had managed to crash in a section of the base that had no sensors did not mean that the collectors were completely unaware of where they were. And fittingly for an insectoid race, the moment Revan and her team made their location known, they were swarmed by every single drone coming to protect the hive. Hundreds of drones seemed to come from the very walls of the station, many of them not even armed, and rushed forward trying to drown them by sheer numbers. And against a different group, they might have even been a challenge. But against the crew of the Normandy? Even discounting the new weaponry they wielded, the collectors were dying in droves. The hordes of unarmed drones were cut down by precise methodical suppressing fire from both Jacob and Mordin. The larger groups were tripped up and scattered by Miranda's biotic prowess or simply crushed by Jack's brute force. And the few armed drones that stood in the distance suddenly found themselves shot in the back as Kasumi suddenly appeared, only to slip away just as fast using her cloaking tech, which left anything lucky, or from another point of view, unlucky, enough to slip by at the mercy of Revan's blades. A trio of collectors fell to the floor in pieces as the Sith Lord snapped up her left saber to deflect one of those particle weapons from hitting Jack, the beam being deflected unerringly back into the drone's head until it died and released the weapon. "We're too exposed here," she commented lightly. It wasn't that bad just yet, but since they would be fighting near non-stop, every little bit added up. There should be more cover up ahead. But we need to thin them out if we don't want to get torn to pieces. The Normandy XO replied. Revan nodded. Jacob, heavy weapon on the horde. Everyone else suppressing fire on the high ground. Run forward on my signal, she ordered. You got it. Jacob slung his blaster and reached for one of the heavy weapons Revan insisted they bring along. Some of them, such as the rocket and grenade launcher, admittedly weren't very impressive, but others had surprised her with how destructive they could be. She had to admit the Blackstorm launcher scared her a bit. But since they weren't trying to rip a hole in the space station using a miniature black hole, Jacob fell back on a significantly less destructive yet still very deadly weapon. Firing, he called out as the arc projector spat out several beams of electricity into the swarm of collectors that then jumped randomly around from one to another in a way that brought the whole group to a halt, either by killing the drones or having them trip over the bodies of their comrades. Less all-encompassing as her force lightning, but with the benefit that it didn't require any concentration from her, and thanks to the upgraded battery system, would eventually recharge on its own. Revan trusted the others to follow along and immediately rushed ahead, leading the team along the path they had mapped out on the Normandy. A collector tried surprising her and dragging her into a few others as she passed an archway and lost its hands for the attempt thanks to a casual twirl of one of her sabers. A flick of her hand sent the armless drone crashing into its friends, and Revan followed up by throwing her blue saber after it. Once every drone was dead, Revan recalled the blade with a mental tug and turned to inspect their new surroundings. Miranda had been correct that there was more cover for them to use, and the rest of the team was slowly moving forward by using the random pillars and unlevel terrain to hide from the small number of drones in the area. Besides those, the hallways they had just fought their way through had opened up into a massive cavern that ironically protected the team despite leaving them out in the open thanks to the fact any collectors approaching from above had nothing to hide behind and were quickly killed by either blaster fire or biotics. Alert, pathing failure. Legion's voice suddenly crackled over the comms. There is an obstruction in the tunnel. An obstruction? Not uncommon on a space station considering the dangers leaking atmosphere could cause, and definitely something they would have planned for if they had more time, but if Legion was calling for help it was because he had no way of manipulating the lock from his position. That could be a problem. Shepard, my team is moving forward but I don't see the ventilation shaft. We can't assist. Copy. Don't worry, we see it. How are things on your end? Cause we're not seeing nearly as many collectors as I was expecting. Did that mean Revan's team had drawn most of them away? Or had they simply gotten lucky that fewer drones had gathered on the path Shepard's team had taken and it had the vent controls? Well, I think we found the ones you're missing, Commander, Miranda yelled. Revan, more are coming from behind. Before the Sith could turn to deal with that, there was a whisper in the Force that demanded Revan's attention. Harbinger, Kasumi called out. I got it. Revan appreciated Jack's initiative, but she was a poor match for the possessed drone. I'll handle Harbinger, Jack. You secure the rear, she ordered. Mordin, support her. Damn it, fine. Understood. After a quick look to make sure none of the others were struggling, Revan dashed forward to meet the approaching enemy. Just like in the confrontation on Horizon, the appearance of Harbinger meant the other drones suddenly became a lot more coordinated. Revan would slice through one drone just to have 3 or more open fire on her at the same time, even as the Sith used the bodies of their comrades as shields at times, all of them aiming at slight perceived gaps in her guard. Despite that, Revan quickly carved a path directly up to Harbinger and attempted to decapitate the thing. Her red saber crashed into its biotic barrier, but unlike Horizon, this time there was a delay before the lightsaber cut through its carapace and the cybernetics underneath. Then she had to move before the surrounding drones all opened fire on her. Without the presence possessing one of them, they reverted back to their more simplistic method of simply opening fire whether they had a clear shot or not. But Revan could not simply stand still. The presence was already in the process of possessing another drone, and Revan was further from the rest of the team than she would have liked. So even though it was earlier than she planned, Revan let out a breath and sank into the Force. Her first move was to give herself some room by unleashing a powerful Force wave on the drones surrounding her. While it didn't kill any of them, it left the Harbinger alone and vulnerable. Lightning sparked around her hands before she unleashed a torrent at the glowing drone just as it was fully possessed. "You seem somewhat stronger here," she commented lightly, "but a puppet is still a puppet. Easily broken and cast aside. This shell is but one of thousands." The presence responded evenly, despite the drone convulsing under the electrical attack. "Destroying it does nothing." "True, but this time I'm ready for you." The drone quickly died under the electric assault and the presence shifted to another. With Revan drawing more deeply on her connection to the Force, she could practically see the poor slave being dominated thanks to some sort of pseudo-force bond connecting it to its master. This one was further away and guarded by some collectors that managed to find their feet, but they weren't much of a deterrent to her. The possession completed and Revan immediately hit it with more Force lightning. "This does not harm me." "We'll see about that." Revan muttered and deliberately drew on the dark side. Several Force techniques had different applications depending on if the user's alignment was light, neutral, or dark. Force lightning by itself was just controlled and directed electricity, while its light counterpart, electric judgment, could easily stun its target without doing much actual damage. The dark version, though, more commonly named Sith lightning, existed to cause more pain than physically possible by targeting the victim's Force signature. And Revan knew from experience you could broadcast that pain over a Force bond to incapacitate both sides. The blue-white lightning didn't change color, but it gained a baleful edge to it as it ravaged the body of the drone. "What is this?" The presence roared as it tried and failed to sever the bond to its host. One of the more insidious properties of Sith lightning. "What have you done?" "I don't know how you Reapers are somehow able to manipulate the Force, but I have fought galaxy-spanning wars against much more adept users than you. Did you think there weren't ways to affect a puppet master through their pawns?" Revan mocked. "What you are feeling now, machine, is pain. Impossible, we are beyond the failings of organic bodies." "Evidently not. But if you don't believe me, feel free to try again. The collector body was already dying. I'll let you experience this again and again if you wish." There was no reply as the presence retreated, the host body finally dying and freeing it from Revan's attack, and tellingly none of the remaining drones were possessed either. The Reaper was driven off for now. Revan breathed out and released her grip on the Force, feeling the slight strain the short battle had caused. Nothing to be concerned about at the moment, but who knew how long this battle would take? Dismissing that thought, Revan turned and charged at the newest batch of collectors that opened fire. She had a team to get back to. "Oh!" Shepard cursed as an explosion destroyed the bit of cover she was hiding behind and unloaded a trio of blaster bolts into her attacker. Then she had to dive to the side as she noticed another drone pointing one of those particle lasers at her. "Garrus. Assassin." "I see it." The Turian called back and snapped off a shot that took the drone's head clean off. "Good shot." Shepard cheered her teammate even as her eyes darted over the battlefield. She hadn't been kidding earlier when she told the other team they had run into less enemy presence than they expected for the main collector base. Despite fighting a decent amount of the way to the center of the station, they had only come across slightly greater numbers than their own team at most. Not much of a challenge when it came down to it, considering who was on her team, which had Shepard's instinct screaming trap the whole way down, only for the trap to never get sprung. "Over there, Shepard, that should be the final gate," Taylai called out from where she was directing her combat drone to cause havoc among the collectors. Shepard turned to look and saw a holographic control terminal different from the others they had used to help Legion advance through the ventilation shaft. "All right, cover me." There wasn't much between the Spectre and the console besides a pair of unarmed collectors that were quickly shot and moved past. Shepard slammed her Omnitool into the console to allow Edie access and pivoted to keep shooting at the enemies behind her while the rest of her team moved to follow her. "Way's clear, get those doors open," she ordered Legion while picking off some of the drones trying to knock Grunt to the ground. Not that the young Krogan really needed the help. He was laughing as he ripped the arm off one collector, beat another over the head with a severed limb, and nearly blew another in half with his shotgun. Still, if Grunt was getting swarmed, then they were going to need some space while Legion handled the doors. "Samara, singularity on the right side. Grunt, block up the left. Thane, cover him." Shepard began shouting orders. "Taylai, open a line with Legion and see if you can help get the doors open faster. Garrus, on Overwatch. If something looks at us funny, I want it losing its head." A round of affirmatives came back and Shepard set herself up to assist wherever she needed to. First by making sure any collector with a weapon kept its head down if it wasn't getting sucked up into Samara's biotic field, and then by making sure those stayed down once she didn't have a clear shot on anything else. "What's our status, Legion?" "Door malfunction, Shepard Commander. We are having difficulty retracting the doors Revan Empress's team used." And Revan's side was the one with a fuckton more collectors. Damn it, that wasn't good. Shepard was about to tell the Geth to keep working on it, but the Sith Empress spoke up first. "Ignore the doors for now, get Shepard's team through. We'll hold them here." Well, that was good. If Revan was that confident, Shepard wouldn't second-guess her. So trusting Legion and the other team could handle things, Shepard went back to focusing on her own team, and a few moments later, the door opened. "Go, go, go. Get through the door." Half her team rushed forward and moved to support Revan's squad on the other doors while Shepard and the other half backed through, making sure to pick off the collectors rushing towards them in a final desperate bid at stopping them from reaching the main chamber. Once all of them were past the threshold, Shepard called out to Legion and then moved to the other doors, not that they needed her help at this point. Revan stood in the doorway, sabers flashing, and acting a barrier for all incoming fire, while the others had formed up into what could only be described as an execution firing squad for any drones that tried to get through the other side. She didn't even have time to move before Legion overcame whatever issue with the door was and the massive metal slabs slammed shut. "Heh, that was fun," Grunt laughed. "We should do it again." "Let's not," Taylai replied dryly. Shepard looked around and confirmed that at the very least everyone was still here, and after a quick check, none of her team had anything more serious than a few bruises. The collectors clearly weren't prepared for an invasion on their home turf. "Commander, you need to see this," Miranda called from further ahead. While she had looked over the ground team, her exo must have scouted around them. "What do you?" She trailed off as she got her first look at the chamber proper. Just like the rest of collector architecture they had seen so far, the chamber was an incredibly vast open space. Shepard could see stasis pods dotting the walls here and there, but beyond the titanic pipes running through the chamber and some supporting struts, there was nothing in here. Even the rock-like hive material the collectors had all over the place was oddly missing. "Shepard, over here." Miranda interrupted her observations and waved a hand at a nearby stasis pod. Inside was a human woman with reddish-brown hair, but Shepard couldn't tell if she was dead or just unconscious. "Looks like one of the missing colonists," Miranda continued while Shepard ran a hand over the resin-like shell, looking for a way to open the pod. "There's more over here." Thane called out from deeper in the room where the Spectre could see more pods, these ones all filled with members of her missing crew. Shepard started feeling around for some sort of latch or release mechanism. Even if the woman was dead, she didn't want to leave her inside the pod for whatever the collectors wanted to use her for. She didn't find anything immediately, but she paused when she noticed the woman beginning to move inside the pod. "My God, she's still alive." Shepard breathed, then looked over her shoulder at the rest of the team. "Get them out of there, hurry." Order given, Shepard turned back to the pod in front of her and started seriously searching for a way to open the pod. But worst-case scenario, she could just have Revan cut the woman out. The pod didn't seem that tough. While she was searching, the colonist had fully woken up and started screaming and thrashing. Shepard looked up, ready to try and calm the woman down and assure her they would get her out, only to see a scene that was surely going to stick in her nightmares for a good long time. Some sort of greenish gas was being pumped into the interior of the pod, and the colonist wasn't screaming because she was afraid. No, she was screaming because her skin was literally dissolving off her entire body. The colonist began beating the inside of the pod with increasingly bloody hands while Shepard desperately looked for a way to release her for 2 more seconds before giving up. "Revan." Shepard moved out of the way as the Sith Empress quickly ignited one of her sabers and made 3 rapid cuts into the pod before telekinetically throwing the cover across the room. The colonist fell, still screaming, to the floor as more of her just seemed to liquefy off her body. The last thing Shepard saw before she ran off to help the others release the prisoners from the other pods was Revan placing a hand on what was left of the woman's forehead and the screams falling silent. "Right side near the seam. Push up hard and it will open the pod," Kasumi yelled to the others as the first one to figure out how to open them. Shepard ran to the end where more of the crew was trapped and followed the thief's direction. She found a groove that allowed her to get some good leverage and shoved upward. The pod opened with a cracking sound and a hiss of releasing gas. Shepard caught the unconscious crew member as gently as she could and lowered him to the floor before moving to the next occupied pod. She did that twice more before there was only 1 pod left, with Miranda already opening it. The pod cracked open and Shepard moved to catch the woman inside as she fell out. The Spectre had been moving quickly to make sure they got to everyone, but the flash of grey hair easily told her who the last person they rescued was. "Dr. Chakwas, you okay?" she gently asked as she lowered the older woman to the ground. "Shepard?" Chakwas's eyes fluttered as she fought her way back to awareness. You came for us." "No one gets left behind, Karin. You know that." "Well, thank God you got here in time," Kelly said as the entire group was shuffled over to them. "A few more seconds and, I don't even want to think about it." The fellow redhead shuddered. Shepard understood that. She really did. But they didn't have any time. She needed to know if the rest of the kidnapped colonists were still around. If the crew had seen them anywhere. "The colonists were processed," Chakwas said in a hollow, detached voice that hurt Shepard to listen to. "That gas, I assume, contains a swarm of tiny robots. They melted their bodies into some sort of grey liquid and pumped it through those tubes." The doctor motioned to the pipes running overhead. "So they were too late." "Why? What could they possibly need that for?" "I don't know. I'm just glad you got here before it happened to us." "So are we," Miranda commented. "But we still have a job to do." Shepard looked around. Most of the ship crew had blank, almost haunted looks about them, and many had injuries caused by that gas before they were released. "We do, but we're not in any shape to make decisions right now. We'll take 5 minutes to deal with the wounded and plan our next step." Because now Shepard had to figure out what to do with 24 traumatized shipmates that were injured, unarmed, and in absolutely no position to fight. "We can't take them with us." Shepard sighed. I know that. We can't leave them here either. I know. I doubt we'll find a secure area anywhere close either. I know. Some need medical attention as well. Yes, Miranda, I get it. But I need helpful ideas. Shepard did her best to not snap at her exo. She wasn't entirely successful, but Miranda wasn't exactly making it easy. Shepard took a breath and tried to calm herself down again. She was a little more successful this time, but she could still see the image of that colonist starting to melt in front of her. That was going to be a new one for the nightmare list. And just when she had been making progress on the others thanks to Revan's meditation classes. Right, focus. What to do with the crew and the injured colonist? Like Miranda said, they couldn't bring them with them and they couldn't stay here. The first would get most of them shot because no one had kinetic shields, and eventually the collectors would get through the doors again, so the second didn't work at all. There was really only one place they could put them. Hopefully Joker had some good news for her. Joker, can you read me? Shepard asked through her comm. Roger that, Commander, what do you need? We found the crew, and Shepard could almost imagine the way Joker perked up at the news. But we've got several injured. You good for a pickup? Yeah, we can. We've got enough systems back online to make a pickup run, but we'd need to land further back from your position. We can't afford to go back, Shepard. Not now. Miranda whispered bluntly. And she wasn't exactly wrong. The only thing keeping them from being surrounded and overwhelmed by every collector on the station was that they had hit them hard and moved fast. Going backwards was just going to give the collectors the time they needed to regroup and pin them down. But at the same time, they won't make it by themselves. Not unarmed, unarmored, and injured from captivity. The mission is bigger than all of us. And we're not getting a second shot. So send someone to escort them. Revan said as she walked over. Either way, break's over. We need to plan our next step. All right, let's go. Shepard nodded. They could probably spare one person. She just had to balance out skill sets so the crew would be safe without compromising the assault team's effectiveness. So while everyone gathered up, Shepard was busy ticking off who could go and the impact they would have on the rest of the group. Talk to me, Joker. She ordered once everyone was paying attention. Okay, those tubes the doc was talking about all lead into the main control room right above you, Joker briefed them, while Shepard fought down a wave of revulsion. Listening to Chakwas describe how people were melted and sucked up into those tubes for God knows why still set her nerves on end. She was not looking forward to discovering whatever the collectors were using that stuff for. The route is blocked by a security door, but there's another chamber that runs parallel to the one you're in. I cannot recommend that. Edie jumped in. Thermal emissions suggest the chamber is overrun with seeker swarms. Mordin's countermeasure cannot protect you against so many at once. I guess they have to keep their buggy friends somewhere. Kasumi snarked. Too bad it's right where we need to go. Any chance Edie's wrong? Shepard directed at Mordin, ignoring the uppity thief. Chance always possible. Was unable to exhaustively test against injection by overwhelming numbers. Mordin replied before taking a deep breath and a second to seriously think about it. Edie unlikely to be wrong, however. It also doesn't stop the Seekers from just attacking us directly. Jacob pointed out. Do we know if they can do that? Those injectors can get through an undersuit pretty easily, do it enough times and they might open up something important like an artery. That's if they do not carry you off alive. Thane added. Several insect species capture live prey and bring it home to their nests for consumption. Shepard shuddered at the thought of being dragged off as food for a giant seeker swarm. This place was just trying to give her new nightmares. Thanks for the images, all of you, she said, massaging her temples. What about other options? Heavy weapons, biotics, Revan's force powers? Heavy weapons are out, Commander. Jacob quickly said. We'd get a few big groups, but there's no chance of getting everything. I doubt we'd get far. I could escort a group through, but we are going to need a distraction. Revan said. I'd be better leading that effort unless there is no other option. All right, so, can we get through with just biotics? Yes, I think it may be possible. Samara said slowly. A small team covered by an extended barrier. I wouldn't be able to protect a large team, but 3 should be doable if they stayed close. I could do it, too. Miranda asserted. In theory, any biotic could. Shepard immediately threw that idea out. Yes, in theory any biotic could put up the barrier they needed, but not all of them could maintain it long enough to stop the swarm from battering through. She knew for a fact she wasn't able to do so, and she was on the upper end for a human biotic. That meant Jacob and likely Miranda were out as well. All right, Samara and I will take a team through the swarms and open the security doors. She decided. Garrus and Mordin, you're with us. Everyone else will head for the doors and keep the collectors busy. What about me and the rest of the crew, Shepard? Dr. Chakwas asked, waving a hand to the others that had been rescued. We are in no shape to fight. The Spectre nodded at her. I know, that's why I'm going to have Thane escort you further back where the Normandy can pick you all up. Chakwas's shoulders loosened just a little. Thank you, Jane. Shepard smiled. You know me, Karin. I take care of my people. Which is why she was sending Thane. The Drell assassin was a perfect blend of crafty enough to scout ahead and make sure there were no collector ambushes on the way to the pickup point, skilled enough to deal with any there by himself, and as a bonus his eidetic memory would help him backtrack along the route her group took without any issue of getting lost. The fact that it would also prevent him from seeing anything else like melting people while contributing to the mission was a big plus as well. Shepard intended for all of them to live through this if possible, and if she could keep from mentally scarring her team along the way then all the better. We've all got our assignments, she declared. Let's move out. Oh. We are in position, Shepard. Okay. Samara is putting up the barrier and we're here to Ambassador. Shepard's voice crackled before cutting out. Talizora? Signal cut out on their side. Maybe the swarms are causing interference? The Quarian reported, poking at her omnitool for a bit before giving up. Interference was probably too strong to overcome then. Revan nodded. It sounds like they were getting started. So should we. The rescued crew members had already left by now, so the remaining members of the ground team just nodded, checked their weapons, and stood behind the Sith Empress. As the doors opened it became clear very quickly that the collectors were not going to leisurely sit back and wait for the Normandy team to come to them. The second the doors were open enough to allow them, dozens of drones stuck their arms through the opening as they tried to force their bodies through the growing gap. It reminded Revan of some of the plague Sith alchemists had created, the ones that stripped all reason and restraint from the infected as they did their best to kill and consume everything that didn't share their infliction. Revan was actually relieved at the tactic though. You didn't have soldiers throw themselves into a meat grinder right away if they could pick up a blaster, after all. And if the collectors were still trying to drown them under bodies, they still couldn't arm all their drones at once. And they had ways to deal with that. Jack, give us some breathing room. It'd be my goddamn pleasure. The heavily tattooed woman glowed with biotic energy, and just as the doors opened far enough for the collector horde to rush in they were hit in the face by a near-physical wall of energy that pulped the first row before bowling over everything behind them. Grenades. Revan commented, casually deflecting the few incoming shots from the drones actually armed and far enough back to not be knocked over. Everyone else, focus fire on the ones in the back. On it. Jacob replied as he pulled out an M100 grenade launcher and started firing out into the crowd. As expected of someone of his skill level, Jacob scattered the rounds to cause the most amount of damage possible, with Revan only needing to make slight adjustments through the force to ensure the carpet of struggling drones was reduced to bits in a series of explosions. In the meantime, red bolts shot out and burned through the rest of the drones with varying levels of accuracy. But there was no time to stand around appreciating the sights. Keep alert, follow your team leader's callouts, and above all else, keep up. The Sith ordered and ran forward. What followed was another chaotic whirlwind of small conflicts, swinging lightsabers, and blaster fire from all directions. Again, for the most part, Revan trusted Miranda and Jacob to act as the leaders for the rest of the team, while she focused on drawing the enemy's attention and destroying tougher targets and occasionally calling out orders as needed. Somewhat concerningly, the presence failed to make a reappearance during the whole thing. Meaning either Revan's demonstration with Sith lightning had scared it off, or their distraction wasn't as effective as they were hoping. Not to say that they hadn't drawn attention. The collectors were still doing a favorable impression of an overturned anthill, and they were starting to get better armed as more drones managed to retrieve them from whatever counted as an armory on this station or salvaged some working ones from the dead. Revan, we've got Praetorians. Ignore them, keep heading for the security doors. If we do that, we'll be sitting ducks. There's no cover over there. Leave that to me. Revan leapt forward into the densest mass of drones she could, instantly decapitating a handful of drones, and yanked on the force. The insectal aliens went from aggressively grabbing at her to helplessly flailing as if they were in zero gravity in a nanosecond, only to be violently smashed into the floor in a large-scale replication of Miranda's favorite biotic trick. And were then sent flying everywhere as Revan pushed everything away from her, giving her a nice clean arena to deal with the two arriving Praetorians as both of them landed nearby and screamed at her. Revan's helmet took care of the sound as sonic dampeners kicked in to protect her ears, but the physical force from the scream was enough to stagger her just a little. But she recovered before the first one could try stabbing her with one of its forelegs. Sparks flew as her blue saber scraped across the barrier covering the metal limb before failing and cutting through it. Revan doubted there was anything resembling nerves in the biomechanical horror, but it reeled back and screamed again at the loss anyway before overcharging its biotic barrier. The Force cried out in warning. So Revan threw herself to the side as the second Praetorian's particle beams lanced past where she had been standing and washed harmlessly over the first's defenses. The Sith grimaced at the sight. Even one Praetorian was annoying to deal with, but them being able to coordinate like this made them dangerous. Especially since Revan needed to conserve as much of her strength as possible for whatever was up ahead. There was something giving off a feeling like some of the old Sith tombs on Korriban. And Revan had no idea what it could be. Better finish this fast then, she decided as green sparks crackled around her fingertips. Of the three alignments of Force lightning techniques Revan knew, Electric Judgment was easily the one she practiced the least. Not out of some misguided belief that the light technique was somehow weaker than the other two, but simply for the fact that the major advantage it had, the fact it was very hard to unintentionally cause major damage, wasn't very useful in her normal encounters. But like everything else in the universe, there were exceptions to that. And while Electric Judgment wasn't very good at physically damaging something, it was incredibly effective at causing all kinds of hell with electronic systems, organic and synthetic. So as the emerald bands of electricity washed over the undamaged Praetorian, it shut down. Neither the cybernetic components of the fused husks under the flying tank's armor or the remnants of their organic nervous system were enough to save it from Revan's onslaught. Of course, shut down did not mean the same as destroyed. If given enough time, the Praetorian would eventually reactivate, only a little worse for wear. That's why Revan made sure to stab it through the eyes with both her lightsabers. Armor, flesh, bone, and cybernetics burned away under the two beams of contained plasma, and soon after there was little chance of the Praetorian moving under its own power ever again. That didn't mean Revan got out unscathed though. The time she spent ensuring the Praetorian was dead gave the first one enough time to charge over and tackle her off the corpse of its partner. Revan's personal shields and armor were enough to stop her from being splattered by the impact, and she was able to deflect the undamaged limb with one of her sabers, but even then the Sith Empress felt a sharp pain in her side, and her ribs protested a lot as she struggled to push the monstrosity off her. It wasn't easy, especially with over 20 misshapen humanoid heads snapping at her armored visor, but Revan had nearly been eaten by much more terrifying or disturbing things before, so she wasn't as disturbed as she could be when she placed one hand on the roof of its mouth and a foot in the middle of the squirming heads. It also helped that the Praetorian wasn't actually trying to eat her, even if the heads closest to her foot were vainly trying to bite through her boot, but either stab her with one of several sharp protrusions or crush her against its armor. At least it was trying to, until Revan secured her footing and began to push. For a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then the Praetorian began to thrash wildly as the upper part of its head was pushed up by the Sith Empress's force-enhanced strength. Metal began to groan as the armored head pushed past what the hinges could handle. Loud snapping echoed out into the chamber as parts began to buckle and crack. And with one final burst of strength, Revan tore the head of the Praetorian clean off and allowed the whole thing to collapse to the ground, just as dead as its partner. "Holy shit, Ice Queen, that was badass." Jack's voice crackled over Revan's calms. "Also really fucking brutal." "Keeler, it was." Tully Zora agreed. "But wouldn't it have been easier to just cut it with your lightsabers?" Revan stood and hissed as her ribs protested the movement. "No, actually," she replied to the Quarian. "The Praetorian still had its barrier up, and I think it was planning to try something when I did. But those barriers only react to outside impacts. By slowly forcing it open instead of attacking it directly, the barrier wouldn't stop you from breaking the underlying chassis," Miranda accurately concluded. "Correct. Clever. We're set up just outside the security doors. Your stunt managed to buy us some time, but the collectors are starting to emerge faster than we can put them down, and we can't raise Shepard. We might need a backup." Miranda cut off as the security doors suddenly opened. "Never mind. You better hurry, Revan. We can't leave the doors open forever." "On my way." "Oh. One last push," Shepard muttered as her team joined her on the platform. "And then we bring the whole station down on their heads," Revan agreed. Almost miraculously, none of the assault group had taken more than minor injury despite the near-constant combat. And the good news didn't stop there. Shortly after both teams rejoined each other and secured the area, they were able to contact the Normandy and confirm that Thane had successfully escorted everyone to the pickup zone with no casualties. All that was left to do was hit the control room and put a stop to whatever the collectors had been using their captives for. Of course, that did nothing about the massive horde of collectors that were still funneling their way towards them. Which was why only a small team would be going forward while the rest would buy them time to do whatever they needed to. Shepard would be taking Garrus and Tully Zora as her backup. Revan had decided that she would go alone to deal with the force presence she was detecting nearby. There was a token defense from the collectors as they staged a few assaults on the platforms the team used, but for once there simply weren't enough of them to really threaten or slow down the group. And Harbinger, as Shepard had taken to calling the presence-enhanced drones, failed to make another appearance. "This is it," Shepard said as they made their way to the last platform and pressed something on a hollow panel. "All tubes lead to this spot. I'm guessing your force thing is still this way, Revan?" "It is. Directly ahead." The Sith nodded. "Fantastic. Any idea what we're heading into, Edie?" "Scans show the tubes are leading to some kind of superstructure. It is emitting both organic and non-organic energy structures. Given these readings, it must be massive." Revan had never heard the Normandy droid pause or sound uneasy. Now she sounded both. "Shepard, if my calculations are correct, the superstructure is a Reaper." Edie finished just as the platform entered the main chamber. Revan didn't exactly know if the AI was right about it being a Reaper, but there was definitely something being built here. A massive human-looking torso hung lifelessly from 4 anchor points in the center of the chamber. Yet despite the lack of activity, the Sith could feel a Force presence radiating from the clearly unfinished machine, and the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. They're using the kidnapped colonists to build a Reaper, she said, horrified at the realization. That's why their technology is Force active. They are literally made out of the essence of sentience. What? Shepard was just as shocked. Edie, is that true? It appears so. The collectors have processed tens of thousands of humans. Significantly more will be required to complete the Reaper. Fuck. How many more humans do you think they'd try to take? Millions. Perhaps more. Impossible to know for certain. Edie said. This Reaper appears to be in a very early stage of development. An embryo in human terms. So it's not activated yet? We can destroy it before it's alive? The process can be stopped, but it is unclear exactly how much it's developed. I cannot, for example, tell you if it has awareness. It's a monster made from the corpses of thousands of innocents. Aware or not, we're pulling the plug. Shepard declared. How do we destroy it? Those tubes look like the only thing holding it up. Garrus pointed out. We take out those, the whole thing should come falling down. If the collectors are building it here, there must be a way out into space somewhere below. An airlock or hangar. Talizora added. If we need to, we can eject the whole thing and push it into the nearby star. And we've got a rocket launcher. Revan pointed out, waving a hand at the collapsed heavy weapon attached to Garrus's back. Yeah, as good a place to use it as any, I suppose. With very little fanfare, the tubes were targeted and destroyed using everything the ML-77 had. The unborn Reaper slouched forward as the anchor points fell away before the weight of it dragged it down to the abyss that was the collector station. Almost expecting something to go wrong, the team carefully walked to the edge of their platform and watched as the Reaper fell further and further with no sign of activation. Eventually deciding that they had spent enough time waiting, they turned back and went looking for the central control terminal while Shepard made a call. Shepard to ground team. Status report. Jack here. We're tagging them as they come, but feel free to call for an exit anytime. Both Revan and Shepard looked at Talai, who had started cracking into a hollow panel. The Quarian engineer simply nodded that she was inside the systems and ready to take down the station. Head back to the Normandy. Joker, prep the engines. We're about to overload this place and blow it sky high. Ah, sure thing, Commander, but we've got an incoming signal from the elusive man. Edie's patching it through. What? Joker, I don't care. We don't have time. The commander was cut off as her Omnitool sprang to life and a holographic image of the elusive man was projected for the 4 of them to see. Shepard. You've done the impossible. TIM greeted them. Shepard sighed, frustration visibly being restrained by a hair. I didn't do it alone. I had a damn good team behind me the whole way. Yes, I know. You all did what you needed to do, and now you've acquired the collector base. For a little bit, anyway. Soon it's just going to be one big firework. Garrus snarked. TIM ignored the comment. I'm looking at the schematic Edie uploaded. A timed radiation pulse would kill the remaining collectors but leave the machinery and technology intact. This is our chance, Shepard. He exclaimed. They were building a Reaper. That knowledge, that framework, could save us. No chance. Shepard immediately denied. They liquefied people to build this place. Turned them into something horrible. We're going to do exactly what we set out to do in the first place and destroy it. Don't be short-sighted. TIM growled. Our best chance against the Reapers is to turn their own resources against them. No, Shepard's right. Revan cut in. We've finally figured out the secret to how Reaper tech is Force-active. Allowing it to remain would be a betrayal to every sentient that died here. Not just humans. If we ignore this opportunity, That would be a betrayal. Tim snarled. They were working directly with the collectors. Think of the information that must be buried here. Weapons, research data, weaknesses. This is our chance to level the playing field. Imagine the lives that could be saved if we turned those against them. Shepard shook her head. It's not worth it. Besides, if we need weapons, I know someone who can get us some things that are out of this universe. She gave Revan a smirk. To which the Sith could only shake her head at the bad joke. You mean the woman that denied giving Cerberus any meaningful blueprints when we could be manufacturing them in preparation for the Reapers as we speak? The same woman that used the first opportunity she could to grab power for herself. Think, Shepard. If humanity is going to stand a chance, we need every advantage we can get. Not just rely on some handouts from a petty warlord that she will deny giving out to secure her own power. My mind's made up. We'll fight and win without it. Shepard said stubbornly. I won't let fear compromise what I am. You are making a Mr. Tim started and was cut off as Shepard forcefully ended the connection. Boring conversation anyway. The Spectre said lightly. Talai, you good to go? All set, Shepard. We'll have 10 minutes before the main reactor goes critical. That should give us. A massive collision knocked the entire team off their feet. As they scrambled to stand and find out exactly what hit them, Revan felt a warning scream in the Force. Not questioning it, the Sith threw herself at Shepard and tackled her out of the way just as a massive metal hand crashed directly where the commander had been seconds before. Nobody needed to ask what just happened. The massive metal limb and the skeletal figure attempting to climb up onto the platform was unmistakable. The unfinished Reaper was back. And this time it was awake and feeling murderous. Shepard, what's the plan? Garrus shouted as he targeted anything that looked like a weak point. But unfinished or not, the Reaper was still tougher than most things ever made, and the blaster bolts might as well have been pinpricks for all the comparative damage they did. Hold on and don't die. I'm thinking. Better think faster, it's going to tear the platform apart in a minute. Talai called out as the Reaper slipped. But instead of falling back down the chamber, it thrashed its hand out to steady itself and destroyed one of the hexagonal sections they were all standing on. Revan, you have any ideas? Emerald lightning washed over the Reaper, and while it clearly hurt it, the Reaper still functioned. The Sith Empress was forced to halt her attack and dive into cover to avoid the energy beam that fired from the Reaper's mouth. That depends, do you still have the cane? Yeah, but even a small nuke isn't getting through that armor. There was shudder as another platform was torn away. Garrus and Talai started firing at the metal behemoth's eyes in hopes that they would be more fragile. And they must have been, because one arm raised up to protect the angrily glowing orbs. It doesn't have to if we set it off inside the Reaper. Revan called back. We just need an opening. I'm only going to be able to hold it for a short time, so you better not miss. What are you doing? Instead of answering, Revan threw herself into the Force and drew on it as deeply as she dared. Light and shadow seemed to warp and bend around her as she threw her hands out and focused everything on the Reaper. The skeletal arm protecting its face jerked and spasmed as it was slowly pried out of the way by an invisible force, and when the monstrosity tried to sweep another platform with its remaining hand, that one was captured too. The Reaper should have fallen at that point. Nothing was holding it up besides Revan's telekinetic grasp, and the Sith apparently wasn't letting go anytime soon. Instead, the Reaper's skull-like face was smashed downwards into the platform where it remained motionless, despite the thrashing from the rest of its torso. It's I. Blow it out. Revan screamed, voice distorted by the power she was channeling and the strain it was putting on her. Garrus, Talai, and Shepard didn't need to be told again. Blaster bolts, grenades, biotics, whatever they could use to damage the connections holding the mechanical eye was poured into the eye socket with nothing held back. And they were rewarded by a small explosion from something further in that left the thing loose and half hanging out of the thing's head. But it was still in the way. Splitting her focus even more, and feeling blood beginning to pour out her nose from the amount of power she was channeling, Revan seized the eye as well without releasing the rest of the Reaper and pulled. In a horrific shriek of metal, the eye snapped out of its casing and went flying over the other end of the platform. And Shepard saw her chance. "Everyone back away. Far as you can," she ordered as she ripped the last heavy weapon they had on them. The M920 Kane had a short arming time, and that was all Shepard could spare for her team to move. The second it was ready to fire and she was on target, Shepard pulled the trigger and sent the 25-gram special high-explosive round into the Reaper's skull. She had just enough time to hope that there was something vital in that metal skull, and it wasn't for show before the round detonated and knocked her off her feet. The Spectre scrambled to look up at their enemy, but the heavy weapon had done its job. All the lights on the Reaper had gone out, and it slid lifelessly over the edge of the platform once more as Revan released it from her grasp. They did it, they won. So naturally that was when the levitation mechanism for the platform gave out and sent them crashing towards a wall. Oh! Jane Shepard was more than a little surprised that she opened her eyes again after the crash. They had fallen a few hundred feet after all, and she had somehow been out for less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes, the station was still rigged to blow. Groaning as she forced herself back to her feet, the Spectre shook her head and looked around. "Team, sound off," she shouted, looking at the 3 other prone figures around her. Some half buried under some rubble from the crash. "Ugh, I'm alive, I think," Garrus called back, also struggling to his feet. "Don't know how though? I saw one of those beams about to crush my head." "It was Revan," Talai said softly, though both of them heard her anyway. "She made sure none of the debris would harm us." Shepard staggered over to where the Quarian was now kneeling next to her Empress. "Is she?" "Still Ive," Revan rasped, though her voice sounded awful. "You're no geing id ob me yet." Shepard let out a breath of relief before pushing her emotions to a corner of her mind and reaching down to pull the elven woman up. "Right, well, time to get up, Your Highness. We don't have time to lie around. Garrus, get her other arm. We're running for the Normandy." "Yeah, you got it, Shepard." "Oh." Deep in a secure room of the collector station, 4 glowing eyes watched impassively as the last few invaders sprinted through the hallways. Despite the pitiful efforts of its few remaining tools, it seemed the invaders were going to successfully escape the station without a single casualty on their side. No matter. That simply meant its current tools were more flawed than previously believed. All the more frustrating since the anomaly was clearly at its weakest and ready to be removed. But the human had rallied its companions in time, and the station was beginning to shake itself apart as critical components overloaded. The intelligence the beings of this cycle labeled Harbinger judged that the creation of another remote avatar had too high a probability of being destroyed and causing unacceptable feedback and damage to its main self. There were no more moves to take. This game had ended. "Very well. Human, you have changed nothing," Harbinger declared as it watched the invaders stumble towards their spacecraft. "Your species has the attention of those infinitely your greater. That which you know as Reapers are your salvation through destruction. Neither you nor the anomaly has changed what is to come. This cycle will end." Explosions began to chain throughout the station. Thousands of converted tools engulfed by flames or torn apart while Harbinger watched emotionlessly. The deck where the Collector General controlled the responses to all its lesser drones heaved and threw the specially modified tool into its terminal. Harbinger made it look up to where it could see a holographic representation of its true body. "This setback means nothing. We will find another way." Releasing control.